we're continuing on in our series, War, this morning. And Pastor Mark, he kicked us off the first week and talking about trials and temptations, and talked about how patience isn't us waiting on God, but it's about really God waiting for us to trust him when we're going through those difficult times. And last week, Pastor Tim, he shared about who our enemy really is. And being a Christian isn't just a physical battle, it's a spiritual battle. And it doesn't make it any less of a battle, but it does change how we fight. And you have to identify who your enemy is. If you haven't defined who your enemy is, you are fighting a losing battle. And this week, we are focusing on the battle within ourselves. And I believe this to be one of the most difficult battles, the battlefield of the mind. And sometimes our battle is not only spiritual, but it's as personal as it can get, because the enemy is ourselves. James 1:14 says, "But each person is tempted when they're dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed." And so I love the book of James. It's my favorite book in the Bible because it is full of just blunt statements of truth. And James makes it pretty clear that we are usually our own worst enemy. We are tempted by who we are. We are drawn to sin because of our desires. The devil doesn't create something out of nothing. More often than not, he's just mirroring you or myself. He reminds us of our shortcomings. And it's a lot easier to continue making choices, okay, of who you currently are than making choices that will mold you into someone that you want to be. But oftentimes when we're having those struggles, it's a lot easier to blame someone or something else, isn't it? Okay, but like James says in this verse, okay, the devil isn't the root of our temptations. We're the root of our own temptations. How many of you have ever used the devil as an excuse for suffering, mishaps, health issues, circumstances, okay? I think we've all done it at times. And now spiritual warfare is a real thing, okay? Can Satan come after you? Yes, he definitely can. But I do want to bring some perspective to that too, because I think sometimes we give Satan more credit than he actually deserves. And probably ourselves, maybe a little more leniency for our problems than we deserve. Because I haven't read anything in the Bible that says Satan can be in more than one place at a time. I haven't read anything in the Bible that says Satan can read our minds, okay? I have read in the Bible that actually Satan can't really do much of anything unless God allows him to do those things. And so I'm not trying to say that Satan won't ever come after you, but before you go blaming him for health issues or car issues, I want you to just think about this. I doubt Satan sleeps, which if he doesn't, he's really missing out. But either way, do you think that, Satan woke up this morning and, out of 7.5 billion people on the planet, he decided that he's really gonna mess with you by making your check engine light come on, and because of that, you couldn't get your skinny latte, and now you're crabby on your way to work, and all of a sudden a different side of you is coming out, and you don't like that side of you, and so you're just gonna blame the devil instead of, just the circumstance that is actually happening. Way too often we are looking for an enemy and we are looking for a battle outside of ourselves. And it doesn't seem like anything is being accomplished because we incorrectly defined who that enemy is and where that battle is taking place. Yesterday, I ran the Tough Mudder. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of it. It's like a 10-mile race, and there's like 20 obstacles in between. That's why I've got Band-Aids on my hands. The calluses got torn off on some of the ones where I was climbing. But anyways, I didn't wake up this morning and like, oh man, that spirit of soreness really got me today. I mean, he's just after me. No, I mean, we live in a physical world. Okay, we have physical bodies, that can get sore, that can get damaged, and it doesn't mean that someone is necessarily after you. So number one, we need to define our enemy, okay? Make sure you define your enemy. Be willing to admit that more often than not, that enemy might very well be yourself, okay? And that you are being drawn to these different temptations and these different desires because of what is inside you. Number two, choose your battleground. Okay, in war, you've probably heard of the importance of gaining the higher ground, because any combat unit, they strive to do three things really well. They want to shoot, they want to move, and they want to communicate. Okay, and so if you have that higher ground, okay, you're going to have a longer range to be able to shoot. All right, and if you have that higher ground, okay, it's a lot harder to attack going uphill. okay? That's a lot more difficult. And so if you already have that higher ground, it's easier to move around. You can move more efficiently. And also communication, okay? Whether it's communicating by voice or through technology, again, when you have that higher ground, okay, you're gonna have a greater range and you're gonna have less obstructions in your way. And so when you are struggling with an internal battle, okay, where you fight that battle matters. And we need to find that higher ground when we are battling. Just because you are having a mental battle, it doesn't mean that your physical environment is irrelevant. It's not. Think about Jesus in the Bible, okay? When he needed to feel close to God, when he needed advice from God, what did he do? He separated himself, okay? He went and found his higher ground, which for him oftentimes was literally like higher, okay? He would climb mountains, he would go into nature, he'd go into the desert because that was the place where he connected. And so that physical place, okay, mattered to him. It was important to him, even though he was having an internal struggle. And so I want to encourage you this morning, okay, if you are struggling with your weight, McDonald's is not your higher ground. If you are struggling with lust, okay, the beach is probably not a good place for you to be, okay, as there's going to be a lot of skin showing, okay? So you need to find your higher ground for those different places. If you struggle with gossip, you should probably stay off of social media, okay? Facebook is just going to give you all sorts of wrong ammunition that is going to feed into that gossip that you struggle with. And so it's important that we think not only of defining that enemy and what that struggle is, but also, okay, that higher ground and trying to figure out where we have the most advantage, okay? So stop fighting in a place where you are disadvantaged, okay? Define your enemy, find your higher ground, find that place where you have the most advantage. And this might mean, again, removing yourself from a group of people. We've had some people come to our staff, quite a few recently, and just said, you know what, I have a really hard time being a part of this group of people because they really gossip a lot. And those individuals, okay, they've actually removed themselves from that group. And I really commend, the individuals who have done that because they said, I don't want to get drawn into this gossip. And they knew that their higher ground meant that they actually had to separate themselves from that group of people. So define your enemy, choose your battleground, and fight. Now that last one might seem overly simplistic, but some of you need to make that choice to fight again. You've given up, you've accepted that your current circumstances are also going to be your future state. And there are people in this room who have accepted how their marriage is instead of fighting for what it could be. Someone posted a video on Facebook saying a lot of people are ready for a wedding but not a marriage. And I love that, okay? It's so true. A wedding's just an event, okay? That's what that is. But a marriage is commitment. It's work. Because each of us have our own personalities, our own desires. And all of a sudden when you get married, it's not about you anymore, okay? It's about us. It's about you together. And Amy and I, we've gone through some really rough patches in our first 5 to 6 years of marriage. It hasn't been all, just joyful and just fun all the time. But regardless, I'm never going to be satisfied with a status quo marriage, okay? I'm never going to stop fighting for something more within our marriage. And so I just want to encourage you, no matter where you're at, don't give up on that fight. I know that there are people in this room who are addicted to pornography, okay? And you've probably tried to quit 100 times. Don't stop, okay? I don't care how many times you fail. I don't care how many times you backslide, okay? Keep fighting. Don't give up. So whether it's your marriage, whether it's sexual issues, whether it's health issues, whether it's spiritual issues, okay? Don't let shame back you up in a corner, okay? Don't let embarrassment or fear keep you silent, because when that happens, Satan's not gonna come after you because you are already exactly where he wants you to be, okay? He wants you in that place where you are docile and silent and shameful, okay? And he knows, okay, that with confession comes freedom, all right? Satan doesn't want you talking to anyone because he knows that when you confess your struggle, okay, not only do you find freedom, you also find accountability, and all of a sudden that desire to fight against those things is going to come back again. So choose to fight, okay? We all have struggles in our lives, okay? We're all having internal struggles, and whatever yours is, I want to encourage you this morning, okay? Don't stop fighting, okay? Maybe you've given up, and it's something that you used to struggle with, and then after a while, you just kind of gave in. Don't give in, okay? This morning, okay, this is going to be a new start for you to continue that struggle, okay, and to continue fighting. I want us to dig into our main scripture for this morning, 2 Corinthians 10, 2 through 6. Let's read this. I beg you that when I come, I may not have to be as bold as I expect to be towards some people who think that we live by the standards of this world. For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. And we will be ready to punish every act of disobedience once your obedience is complete. Now, first, I want you to notice the language, okay, that Paul is using here. This is intense language. Paul is trying to get a point across. We are at war, okay? And so if you thought being a Christian was about singing Kumbaya and sitting in pews, okay, then this morning you need to get your hands dirty. You need to get back in the trenches. Paul wants us to think as if we were soldiers, okay? Look at those words up there, okay? War, fight, weapons, demolish, strongholds, take captive, punish. Okay, when was the last time you viewed Christianity like that? Now, secondly, I want to talk a bit about the context of these verses. Way too often the Bible is taken out of context because we are coming at it from a viewpoint of what does this mean to me? And it's dangerous when we approach the Bible in that way because one of two things happens, okay? First, what happens oftentimes is if it doesn't mean something to you specifically in this very specific stage of life you're in at this very moment, okay, then you just kind of do away with it and you say, oh, well, you know, this doesn't really apply to me. It's not really relevant to me, okay? I hear that so often. I hate that so much when someone, you know, is talking about a sermon or a scripture. Well, that's not relevant to me. No, it's relevant to you, okay? And the other thing that can happen is, okay, if it doesn't instantly, you know, apply to where you're at right now and you want to make it apply, okay, then you kind of change the meaning, okay? And you say, oh, well, what does this mean to me? Well, I'm going to say it means this, okay? And so we kind of change and get away from the original intention of it. So instead of, when we read Bible passages, instead of saying, what does it mean to me? We should ask the question or questions, what was God's intention for this verse? What was the author trying to get across? What was their main point? Okay, who were they talking to? And so this passage is a great example of one that is often misunderstood. We read it, okay, and we're a lot of times we come at it from, again, what does it mean to me? And we think, okay, well, we're talking about spiritual battles, and Paul is telling me that I need to take my thoughts captive. But Paul, he isn't talking generally here. Okay? And he also isn't talking about you or I taking our own thoughts captive, okay? He's talking about taking somebody else's thoughts captive. How do you take someone else's thoughts captive? Well, we'll get into that. So during this time, Paul, he's been traveling around, okay, and trying to establish churches. And so he's been to Corinth 2 times already, and this is a letter between him and the church of Corinth. And for the most part, most of the Corinthian believers have kind of been won over by Paul. But there was still this small group of people who were slandering him and trying to discredit him among the believers and saying, yeah, you know what, he's bold at a distance. You know, he'll say, oh yeah, you know, I'm going to discipline you and I'm going to take action if necessary. But they're saying when he's actually here, okay, he's weak, he's not going to do anything. And so really what they were saying is that he was indecisive and that he didn't have any authority from God, okay? That's really what they were questioning. And so that's the context that we're working within for these verses. So I want to read this passage again. All right, let's start with verse 2. I beg you that when I come, I may not have to be as bold as I expect to be towards some people who think that we live by the standards of this world, okay? So Paul is saying, hey, don't make me do it, okay? I don't want to show up and have to be the bad guy. Okay, these churches that Paul set up, these are like family to him, all right? And so he's going to make his 3rd trip to the church of Corinth. He's excited to see the people. And what he does not want to do is have to show up and kind of lay down the line, okay? He's saying, please don't make me do it. I don't want to have to be, you know, bold and kind of, you know, discipline people. The other day I was at home alone with my 16-month-old son, Noah. And he's got this red wagon and that he got from Grandma and Grandpa that he loves. And on the wheels, there's these little valves, okay, that go over. And so he likes to go over and he likes to unscrew the little valve caps, and occasionally he'll put them in his mouth, which obviously is not a good thing. And so the other day it was him and I kind of see him, and he's kind of crawling over towards it, and he's kind of looking back like mischievously. And so I know what he's doing, and so I kind of said, Noah, don't do it. You're going to get in trouble if you do it, and he's hearing me, and he goes over anyways and unscrews it. And so I go over there and, slap his hand and, kind of scold him. And he just kind of furrows his brow and kind of gets more frustrated. And sometimes he kind of like flexes too, be like, ah. And so he just kind of does one of those. And so anyways, sure enough, goes back, does it again. Same process, slap his hand, scold him. This time he kind of growls at me. And so anyways, this happens 4 times. And so finally the 4th time, slap his hand again, scold him. And this time he's got big crocodile tears rolling down his cheeks. And so he crawls over to me and he just wants a hug. And so I give him a hug, and after that he's fine, leaving the wagon alone. But I kind of think that this is where Paul's sort of coming from too, okay? He's excited to see his church family, and he does not want to have to show up, and stop little kids from unscrewing valves, okay? So that's where I think Paul is coming from. Moving on. For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And so Paul, he's still talking about these few slanderers, okay? These few people who are trying to resist what Paul is doing and what God is doing. And Paul, he's not worried about defending his reputation, okay? What he's worried about is people getting led astray, and he's worried that the mission that God has given him is going to be slowed down. And so he's saying, we're not going to physically fight and assault these people, okay? We aren't going to use the weapons of the world, okay? We are going to rely on divine power, all right, God's power to shut these people up once and for all, okay? The strongholds that they have in some people's minds, we're going to demolish it. Okay, their arguments and speculations trying to get people to doubt God and doubt myself, we're going to demolish it. All right, and we take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. And we will be ready to punish every act of disobedience once your obedience is complete. And so these individuals, they have an incorrect worldview. And from that incorrect worldview, they're trying to discredit Paul, okay? And they're coming from a place of pride and arrogance. And Paul is like, all right, I'm done, okay? I'm going to crush you, okay? Through the power of the Holy Spirit, through God's divine power, Paul is going to demolish their arguments, their worldview. And in doing so, will literally take their thoughts captive for the purpose of making them obedient to Christ. Not the kind of style of evangelism that we're used to, is it, okay? Paul's basically saying, when I crush your argument, okay, and you have nothing left to say, and I win, okay, you will be forced to line up your thoughts in obedience with Christ because you're going to have no argument left to stand on. Okay? And so we see from this that this passage, Paul isn't commanding us to take our thoughts captive. Paul is talking about himself and the church of Corinth taking captive the thoughts of these few people who are opposed to them. And so again, when we read scripture, okay, we don't first say, what does this mean to me? First, we need to look at the context and try to define what the authors were intending from this passage. Now after, okay, we've looked at that, and now we know who's being talked to, okay, what the meaning of the passage is. Now this is where we look to apply it to ourselves, because almost always there's some sort of lesson we can pull out of it, okay, right? The Bible is full of principles and lessons that we should live by. And so I believe that there is a personal application to things. And so this passage, it centers around one main thing: centering your thoughts and opinions and worldview correctly on the knowledge of God, okay? Bringing those things obediently into line with God. So how does this relate to you and I? Well, if Paul wasn't talking to us, okay, specifically, and if this was a specific situation between Paul and the church in Corinth and this small group of resistors, why does this matter to us? How does this apply? I believe it applies when we put ourselves in the shoes of those people who are resisting. Okay? When we submit our thoughts, when we submit our opinions, when we submit our viewpoints to God, and if Paul was here, okay, we can almost put ourselves in the shoes and be like, okay, God, okay, Paul, what can you, excuse me, what can you demolish, okay, in my life? What viewpoints do I have that do not line up with you, okay? What is in there that is not of you? Is there doubt in there? Do I have an incorrect viewpoint on this? What in there needs to be demolished? And so when we are having this internal struggle, okay, when we are having this battlefield of the mind, we can kind of approach it from two different ways. And there's this one side of us, again, that should invite that destruction from God, okay? God, come in and destroy anything that does not line up with you, okay? Maybe there's things in my life that I don't even notice anymore because I've allowed it to take root. And I want you to come in, I want you to make those things known, and I want you to destroy it. All right? And the other side of us is taking the offensive, okay? Because other times there are thoughts that come into our head and we know that they're wrong in the moment, okay? And that's not time to just let them sit around, okay? And just kind of, sit in our minds for a while. That's when we take those thoughts captive right away and we go ahead and get rid of those, okay? And take the offensive. But how often do we do the exact opposite, okay? Something will come into our head, so we're having a thought, or maybe we feel a certain way, and instead of trying to get rid of it right away, we almost demand that it be validated, okay? Sometimes we even know that it's not in line with God, but we allow it to be there, and sometimes in our arguments with our spouses or our friends, we want those things to be recognized and validated, and sometimes it kind of feels like, have any of you ever had an issue in God on WebMD? Do you know what WebMD is? Okay, it has all these different symptoms and stuff, and you can go on there. And so sometimes, you might be feeling something physically, and you're like, something's not right. And so you go on WebMD, and you're searching through symptoms, just trying to find a label or a diagnosis. And so you'll be scrolling through it, and then you'll find some weird name, adrenoleukodystrophy. Yep, that's me. I knew it. Yep, I found it. And so we find a label or a diagnosis that kind of tells us what it is, and then all of a sudden we seem to be happy with that. Your situation hasn't improved. Your symptoms are the exact same, but now you know a name for it. But sometimes we do that, we're scrolling through, it's yes, found you, got it. Told you, babe, told you I could find what was wrong with me, and then it's we just leave it there. Now we're satisfied, okay? So, defining the issue, defining the enemy is good, defining the problem, but once it's defined, we can't just leave it there, okay? We have to do something about it. Think about war. It's not this giant game of hide and seek where you're searching around, you find the enemy, and you're ha, found you. It's all right, now you're it, and you run away. No, you find the enemy and you destroy them, okay? When that opposition is there, you find a way to get rid of it. And so Paul's plan wasn't to go to the church of Corinth and go to the city of Corinth and kind of interview each person until he found the bad ones, and then it was okay, I identified them. Okay, it's okay, I'll keep an eye on them. No, okay, he was going to go there, and he said, I want you and the church, I want you to help me. We are going to take their thoughts captive. We are not going to allow them, okay, to even think in the way that they've been thinking. There is a book called Switch On Your Brain by Dr. Carolina Leaf, and she is a cognitive neuroscientist. I heard her speak at a conference, and I read her book. And she's been involved in groundbreaking scientific discoveries regarding the brain for decades now. And she started out her career with the goal of answering one question: can the mind change the brain? Because the physical brain, it used to be thought of as unchangeable, okay? And so if you had brain damage from something, a car accident, an accident, they used to think that's just the way it is. The brain cannot change. If you have damage, then you have that damage, okay, for the rest of your life. And Dr. Leaf, she was pretty significant in helping develop what we now know is true, that the brain can change, okay? It's called neuroplasticity. And something that's really cool that she has written about and she speaks about is that a thought is a real thing, okay? And for me, learning this really helped me recognize the power that my thought life has, for good or for bad. A thought physically takes up space in your brain. Your brain has 100 billion nerve cells, okay? And inside your brain, there are these anatomical structures that kind of look like trees, okay? They've got these stems and they branch out. And these are your thoughts. And so a thought is not just mental. A thought is a physical thing, okay? It's crazy. And so through the process, okay, through our senses, okay, we take in this information. That's what, our senses allows us to take stuff from the external world and it brings it into the internal world, okay, of our mind. And through that process, okay, these actual proteins are made, okay, in our brain. And those proteins turn into these kind of branches of these thoughts and memories, and they grow in your brain. And so our thoughts, they're actually physically wiring something into our brain, which after 24 to 48 hours, that thought turns into something that they call a semi-permanent memory. And so if you previously believed that just, hey, my thoughts are just my thoughts and they're harmless, okay, I want to change your thinking about that this morning. Your thoughts are producing proteins, okay, and literally growing mini thought trees that can turn into memory trees in your brain, okay? You're physically wiring into your brain, okay, what you think. And the thoughts that you allow to stay there, okay, can root themselves in there, whether good or bad. So don't allow bad thoughts to take root, okay? They say that you have about 24 to 48 hours, okay, when you have a thought to get rid of that thought and replace it with something different before it becomes a semi-permanent memory, all right? Have you ever woken up and you had a really messed up dream and you're like, man, I'm glad people can't read my thoughts. Okay, it's just one of those like really weird things. You're like, I have no idea where this came from. And there's so much about the mind and the brain that we just really don't understand yet. The reality is between our conscious state, our subconscious state, the dream state, okay, oftentimes we have thoughts that come into our head and we didn't really choose for it to be there, okay? A lot of times we have thoughts and it's like, well, I don't know where this thought came from, I don't want it there, but it is there either way. And so when that happens, we need to know what to do with that, okay? Maybe it's a result of sinful nature. Okay, we're born into a sinful world. Maybe it's a product of, the environments that we grow up in, okay, as we see, all this different like media and stuff. Maybe it just kind of gets locked in our subconscious and at times it comes out. But either way, when it comes out, we need to know what to do with it. And so first of all, you need to recognize the thoughts that you are having, okay? When you have a wrongful thought, when you have a toxic thought that comes into your head, don't just shrug it off, okay? Recognize it and then replace it with something that should be there instead, okay? Your thought life is a battleground. When you are having a toxic thought, a thought that is not obedient to what God wants, recognize it and replace it, okay? You can make a conscious decision to accept or deny thoughts. And I've used this quite often, really my entire life. When I was growing up, I was pretty OCD as a kid, okay? For some reason in my mind, things would become dirty or tainted, and I would have to go through a process to be able to move on with my regular day. And so one thing was clothes. Laundry must have been a nightmare for my mom because like 3 or 4 times a day, it's not like I fell in the mud. I would have to take off all my clothes because they were dirty, and then I would not wear them again until my mom washed them. And so this would happen like 4 times a day. And also for the next day, I would have to lay out all my clothes as if I was steamrolled. And so every day on my bedroom floor, okay, there would be like my shirt, okay, and it'd be laying on the floor and I have to like get all the wrinkles out, and there would be the pants, and there's the socks sticking out, okay, and my brothers would make fun of me. They'd walk into the room and be like, oh, Zach got steamrolled again. And so I had these things that I just couldn't move on with regular life until, I had this kind of process that I went through. I also really liked Legos. And I would be playing with Legos, and all of a sudden, one of the Lego pieces would become like dirty, okay? And so the only safe thing to do would be to quarantine all the Legos that were near it that could have possibly touched it, and I would bring them all up, and I'd have to go into the bathroom, lock the bathroom door, I'd have to wipe out the sink in a certain way, fill it with water, a little bit of soap, and I would take the Legos one piece at a time, and I'd have to put it in the water. It would have to be fully submerged, and it couldn't touch any sides of the sink, okay, or the bottom. And so I do that one piece if you ever played with Legos, you can realize how long this would take, okay? One Lego piece at a time, and then I'd lay it on a towel to air dry, okay? it was insane. But for me, I had to go through this process. I really had these OCD tendencies. And so I got to a point as I got older, and I just realized, you know what, this isn't normal and this isn't healthy. And I remember praying even as a kid, like, God, I want to have, kind of a normal life, okay? I don't want to be spending 3 hours a night with my Legos in the sink, okay? And so I just remember praying that prayer to God and just asking him for help and saying, God, you know what, this issue in my head, it's not logical, okay? It's not rational, and I understand that, and yet I can't seem to get over it. I need your help with this internal problem that I was having. And so I asked God to remove that irrational fear, and he did. Sometime kind of around middle school, high school, I just kind of forced myself out of that. I just started making choices opposite of that. And now I only wash my bath towel every 6 months. So something has really changed the other way. So that's completely gone away. And in high school and early college, I really struggled with intense anxiety. Has anyone ever had anxiety problems before? Okay? And it's this really, really weird feeling, okay? Because it's like you're constantly in this like fight or flight mode, okay? And you can never stop overthinking. You can never stop overanalyzing or over-worrying. And it's like your thoughts run your life. And it's kind of this out of control, extremely like nervous feeling, but you don't know why. Okay? And so I really struggled with this, deep anxiety. And I just remember meditating on Philippians 4:6. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, okay? And I would just pray on that. And again, I would just say, God, I'm anxious about something. I don't even know what. If there's legitimacy to this, okay, if I'm anxious for some reason that I don't understand, bring that to light so I can work through the issue. If not, God, you don't want me to live in this anxious state. I know that you don't. This is not your plan for me to constantly feel worried and anxious, okay? And so take that away. And so I'm not saying that, all you have to do is just do this once and all your problems will go away. No, this was a daily thing. But I made the decision, instead of accepting that anxiety, that I was going to work on it and that I was going to continue to fight with that internal struggle again and again. Later in college, I went through a bout of depression. No joke, I was in psychology class, okay, in college. We were going through the symptoms of depression. And as we went down, it was like boom, boom, boom. And I was sitting there, I was like, dang it, I'm depressed. And it was like, seriously, like everything lined up. And I had known that like something was kind of up with me because I had been acting really weird like the previous months. But I had never been depressed before, so I didn't know how it felt. And there was probably some pride mixed in, so I didn't want to like reach out for help. I wanted to pretend like I had it all together. And so anyways, I went and talked to my teacher afterwards, and it was just kind of a funny conversation, that I've self-diagnosed my depression while in psychology class talking about depression. But anyways, those next couple of months, okay, it was something that, again, it was really an internal struggle. It was really a battlefield of the mind. And I remember that I would just have to counteract the thoughts that I was having, because what I felt like doing was just laying in bed all day, okay? I felt completely apathetic towards life, okay? I felt like I had absolutely no purpose. But I would have to tell myself, you know what, Zach, your brain is not being honest to you right now, okay? You do want to hang out with your friends. You don't want to lay in bed all day because that's not a good use of your time. You do have a purpose. God does have a plan for you. And I would have to speak, okay, and accept those thoughts, and I would have to deny and push out those other thoughts. And so I had to continually make these conscious decisions to do so, to get rid of those bad thoughts and to replace it with positive thoughts that I knew were true, regardless if I felt that way, okay? And so it was a process, but I got through that as well. Now you're probably thinking, like, is he stable? Like he just went through a lot of issues. but I think that we all have issues like that, okay? And Tim and Amy, if you could just come up and give us a little music. If we could have our prayer team come up, if Pastor Mark and Loran could come up, and we're just going to have a little time of prayer. I really want to encourage you this morning. If you have a struggle, okay, that you've given up on, okay, sexual issue, health issue, marriage issue, okay? What you are now does not have to be what you are in the future, okay? Where you're at now does not mean that you're stuck there. And some of you need to reclaim that fight and choose to fight again about whatever that issue is, okay? And there are some of you, and you're thinking, you know what, I haven't given up the fight, but I could really use some help, okay? That's what our prayer team is for. I promise you, prayer works, okay? There are so many times in my life that I know that when I personally prayed or when someone else was praying for me, okay, things happened that should not have happened, all right? So prayer does work. And so if any of this spoke to you this morning, okay? Again, if you feel like you need to fight again, okay, and you've given up, or if you feel like you're still fighting, but you just really kind of need a pick-me-up, okay? I really just encourage you to come forward and just take a few minutes and just pray. And after we just spend a little time with this, I'll go ahead and dismiss us. If you're praying, just go ahead and just keep praying. For the rest of you, just if you have one of those internal struggles, okay, recognize it and replace it. And as you're just going through this next week, okay, we're all gonna have thoughts at times that should not be there. Recognize it and replace it, okay? And just really try to replace it with thoughts that God would want you to have. Because you will be who you know, the thoughts that you have, that will end up defining what you do, and it will motivate your actions, okay? So when it all comes down, okay, you really are what you think. And so it's a very just important thing. Don't give up, okay? Keep battling. And I just pray that you have a great rest of your Sunday and just a great rest of your week. See you later.